The rain tapped against my apartment window like impatient fingers, each droplet racing down the glass in jagged patterns. I stared at my phone screen, the blue light illuminating my face in the darkened room. My heart hammered against my ribs as I typed those two simple words. We're done. My finger hovered over the send button. 3 months of secret meetings, whispered promises, and a growing sense of suffocation had led to this moment. I closed my eyes, inhaled deeply, the scent of the chamomile tea I'd made to calm my nerves filling my nostrils, and pressed send. The message whooshed away, and immediately 3 dots appeared. He was typing already. Of course he was. Alessio Moretti never kept anyone waiting. His response came seconds later. You don't decide that. 4 words. No emotion. No question mark. Just a statement of fact, as if he were commenting on the weather or stating his coffee preference. I felt a chill crawl up my spine despite the warmth of my oversized sweater. My hands trembled as I set the phone face down on my coffee table, as if that small act of defiance could somehow shield me from what I knew was coming. I'd met Alessio 3 months ago at Bellini's, the upscale Italian restaurant where I worked as a hostess. It was a rainy Tuesday evening, much like tonight, when he walked in surrounded by 3 men in dark suits. Even before I knew who he was, something about him commanded attention. He moved with purpose, his tailored charcoal suit accentuating broad shoulders, his presence immediately altering the energy of the room. The restaurant manager had practically sprinted across the dining room to greet him personally, leaving me standing awkwardly with menus in hand. This is Ellie, my manager had said, gesturing toward me with a nervous smile. She'll take excellent care of you tonight, Mr. Moretti. Alessio's dark eyes had locked with mine, and I felt as if he could see through me, past the professional smile, beyond the carefully applied makeup covering the exhaustion of working double shifts to make rent. His gaze lingered a moment too long before he offered a slight nod. A pleasure, he'd said, his voice carrying the faintest trace of an Italian accent. I hadn't known then who he was. I didn't know that Alessio Moretti controlled half the city's imports, that politicians and police captains were on his payroll, that his family name inspired both fear and respect depending on which circles you traveled in. I just knew that something about him made my skin prickle with awareness. He'd returned to Bellini's 3 nights later, this time alone, except for his driver who remained outside. He requested my section specifically, though I rarely served tables. The manager had nearly fallen over himself accommodating the request, assigning another hostess to the front while I nervously took Alessio's order. You're working 2 jobs, he'd stated while scanning the menu. Not a question. I'd frozen, wine decanter in hand. I'm sorry? The bags under your eyes. The way you check your watch. You're exhausted. His eyes had lifted to mine. Why? Something about his directness had disarmed me. Art school isn't cheap, I'd admitted. Neither is rent. He'd nodded as if confirming something to himself. Bring me whatever the chef recommends, and join me, if you would. That night had been the beginning of everything. After my shift, his driver had appeared with an envelope. Inside was exactly the amount of my monthly rent in cash, along with a business card bearing only a phone number. No pressure to call, Alessio had said. Just an offer to make my life easier. I hadn't called for 2 weeks, but when my roommate suddenly moved out, leaving me with double the rent and a looming tuition payment, my fingers had dialed that number before I could talk myself out of it. Now, 3 months later, I knew the truth about the man whose bed I'd shared, whose world I'd glimpsed. The import business was a front for moving everything from illegal weapons to drugs. The respect I'd witnessed in public was fear poorly disguised. The generosity he'd shown me came with invisible strings that tightened a little more each day. The final straw had come yesterday, when I'd run into an old friend from art school at a cafe. Michael had hugged me hello, and we'd chatted for all of 5 minutes before I noticed one of Alessio's men watching from a corner table, phone in hand. 3 hours later, Alessio had called, asking pointed questions about my friend, as if I'd committed some terrible betrayal. You're having me followed, I'd whispered in disbelief. I'm keeping you safe, he'd corrected, his tone gentle but leaving no room for argument. That's when I knew I had to end it. The phone on my coffee table buzzed, pulling me back to the present. Another message. I'm coming over. We'll discuss this in person. My heart rate doubled. I grabbed the phone, typing frantically. There's nothing to discuss. Please respect my decision. The response was immediate. You made a decision based on incomplete information. Open your door in 20 minutes. I threw the phone down as if it had burned me. 20 minutes. That's how long it would take his driver to bring him from his downtown penthouse to my modest apartment in the Arts District. I stood up, pacing the small living room, my sock-covered feet silent against the hardwood floors. What had I been thinking? You don't just break up with Alessio Moretti via text. You don't just break up with him at all. I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror. Pale face, dark blonde hair pulled into a messy bun, eyes wide with panic. I barely recognized myself. 3 months with Alessio had changed me in subtle ways. The designer clothes hanging in my closet next to my thrift store finds, the expensive perfume on my dresser, the way I now automatically scanned rooms for exits, cataloged faces, watched for threats, habits I'd picked up from him. My phone began to ring. His ringtone, Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. He'd programmed it himself, saying the piece reminded him of me, delicate but with unexpected depth. I let it ring out. It started again immediately. I silenced it, watching as Alessio flashed on the screen before fading to black. Then again and again. By the time I heard the distinctive purr of a luxury car engine outside my building, I had 20 missed calls and my resolve was crumbling. I peered through the blinds to see his black Mercedes idling at the curb, the driver opening the rear door. Alessio emerged, straightening his suit jacket, navy tonight, paired with a light blue shirt, no tie. Casual for him. He glanced up at my window, and even from the 3rd floor, I could feel the intensity of his gaze. I stepped back quickly, heart in my throat. My doorbell rang 3 minutes later. I stood frozen in the center of my living room, arms wrapped around myself. The bell rang again, followed by a soft knock. Ellie. His voice carried through the door, controlled and even. Open the door. I remained rooted to the spot. Eleanor Rose Sullivan. The use of my full name made me flinch. I know you're standing exactly 12 feet from this door. Open it, or Marco will. Marco, his driver, bodyguard, and the man who I'd once seen break someone's wrist for accidentally bumping into Alessio at a nightclub. I moved toward the door on trembling legs, unfastening the chain with clumsy fingers before turning the deadbolt. I opened the door just enough to see Alessio standing in the hallway, hands in his pockets, expression unreadable. No Marco in sight, though I knew he wouldn't be far. May I come in? Alessio asked, as if this were any normal visit, as if I hadn't just tried to end things between us. I stepped back wordlessly, opening the door wider. He entered my apartment with the same commanding presence he brought everywhere, immediately making my space feel smaller. I caught a hint of his cologne, sandalwood and something darker, spicier, as he passed. He surveyed the room, taking in the half-packed box of art supplies in the corner, the travel bag peeking out from my bedroom doorway. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Going somewhere? He asked, voice dangerously soft. I was planning to stay with a friend for a few days, I replied, fighting to keep my voice steady. I need space. Space, he repeated, testing the word as if it were foreign to him. He turned to face me fully, dark eyes studying me with the same intensity he applied to everything that interested him. You think I'm suffocating you? It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. You had me followed, Alessio. I had you protected, he corrected. There's a difference. Not to me. I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly cold, despite the warmth of the apartment. Normal relationships don't work that way. A small smile curved his lips, though it didn't reach his eyes. When have I ever given you the impression that what we have is normal, Tesoro? He took a step toward me, and it took everything in me not to back away. I needed to stand my ground, to be strong. Just this once. You don't own me, I said quietly, looking directly into his eyes. Something darkened in his expression. A flash of something possessive and primal before his features smoothed once more. No, he asked, reaching out to tuck a stray lock of hair behind my ear. His fingers lingered against my cheek. Then why does it feel like you've carved out a place inside me that belongs only to you? Why does the thought of you walking away feel like someone is cutting out a vital organ? His words hit me like a physical blow. This was the danger of Alessio Moretti. Not his power or his connections, but the moments of raw vulnerability that made me forget who he was and what he was capable of. I can't do this, I whispered, stepping back from his touch. I can't be watching over my shoulder, wondering if your men are following me, if my friends are being investigated. I can't live like that. You think leaving changes anything? He asked, his voice gentle despite the steel underneath. You think I'll simply let you walk away? That I'll forget you exist? He closed the distance between us again, his hand coming up to cradle my face. You became mine the moment you called that number, Eleanor. Perhaps even before that, I felt tears welling in my eyes. Please don't do this. Do what? Fight for what's mine? His thumb brushed across my lower lip. You knew who I was, what I am. You came to me with open eyes. I didn't know everything, I countered, my voice barely audible. No, he agreed, something like regret flashing across his features. Not everything. The silence between us stretched, filled only by the sound of rain against the windows and my own uneven breathing. Alessio's hand dropped from my face, but his eyes never left mine. Dark, intense, searching for something I wasn't sure I wanted him to find. Sit down, he said finally, gesturing to my small couch. Please, he added, the words sounding foreign on his lips. I hesitated, then perched on the edge of the sofa, hands clasped tightly in my lap to hide their trembling. Alessio didn't sit beside me as I expected. Instead, he moved to the window, looking out at the rain-slicked street below, his back to me. The streetlight caught his profile, highlighting the sharp angle of his jaw, the slight tension in his shoulders beneath his perfectly tailored jacket. Do you know what happened today? He asked, still facing the window. Before I received your message? I shook my head before realizing he couldn't see me. No, I said quietly. The Donovan family tried to move into the East Harbor. He spoke conversationally, as if discussing a minor business inconvenience rather than what I knew was a territorial challenge from a rival organization. 3 of my men were hospitalized. 1 might not make it. A chill ran through me. This was the reality of his world. Violence hovering just beneath the surface of his carefully controlled exterior. A world I'd glimpsed, but never fully comprehended. I'm sorry, I said. Because what else could I say? But what does that have to do with us? With following me? He turned then, his expression grave. Everything is connected, Eleanor. The moment people realized you were important to me, you became a target. A weakness they could exploit. I never asked to be part of this, I whispered, and yet, here we are. He crossed the room in 3 long strides, sinking down beside me on the couch. His proximity sent electricity skittering across my skin despite my determination to remain unmoved. When I saw you with that man today. His name is Michael, I interrupted. He's an old friend from art school, nothing more. That isn't the point. Alessio's voice remained calm, but I caught the dangerous undercurrent. The point is that anyone close to you becomes a potential threat. To you, to me, to everything I've built. So I'm supposed to have no friends, no life outside of you? The words came out sharper than I intended. Months of growing frustration finally finding release. That's not protection, Alessio. That's a prison. Something flashed in his eyes, hurt, perhaps, before hardening into resolve. You think I enjoy this? Knowing that my enemies would not hesitate to hurt you to get to me? He ran a hand through his dark hair, a rare gesture of agitation. When my father was in charge, he kept my mother locked away in our estate outside the city. She couldn't leave without an armed escort, couldn't even go shopping without planning it a week in advance. His jaw tightened. I swore I would never do that to someone He stopped abruptly. To someone he what? Loved? Cared for? Owned? The unfinished sentence hung between us like a tangible thing. I've given you as much freedom as I can, he continued after a moment. But there are limits to what's safe. I felt something inside me crack at his words. I'd been so focused on the surveillance, on the feeling of being watched and controlled, that I hadn't considered his perspective. But even understanding his reasoning didn't change the fundamental problem. I can't live like this, I said again. softer this time, always wondering if I'm being followed, if my every move is being reported back to you. It's not healthy, Alessio, and you think walking away solves the problem? He leaned closer, his scent enveloping me, expensive cologne and something uniquely him. You think the Donovans wouldn't use you against me even if we're no longer together? As long as I care about you, Eleanor, you're at risk. The implication stunned me into silence. Unless he stopped caring altogether, I would never truly be free. The realization settled over me like a heavy blanket, suffocating and inescapable. Alessio must have read the thought on my face because his expression softened marginally. He reached for my hand, his warm fingers enveloping mine. I didn't come here to frighten you, Tesoro. I came because what we have is worth fighting for, worth protecting. Even if it means controlling every aspect of my life, I asked, pulling my hand away. He sighed, a sound so weary it momentarily stripped away the powerful facade, revealing the man beneath. I've made mistakes in how I've handled this. I should have been more transparent about the security measures. It was as close to an admission of wrongdoing as I'd ever heard from him. Alessio Moretti didn't apologize. He fixed problems, eliminated obstacles, moved forward with unwavering certainty. Yet here he was, offering something that almost resembled remorse. I don't know what to do, I admitted, my voice small. I feel like I'm drowning, Alessio. His eyes searched mine, then let me help you breathe. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed on the coffee table. We both glanced at it. A text from Michael, asking if I wanted to meet for coffee tomorrow to discuss the alumni exhibition. Alessio's expression darkened instantly, the momentary vulnerability vanishing behind a mask of cold calculation. He reached for the phone, but I was faster, snatching it away. Don't, I warned, clutching the phone to my chest. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You can't control who I talk to, who I see. This isn't about control, he said, his voice deceptively quiet. It's about information. What do you really know about your friend Michael? When did you last see him before today? I frowned. What does that matter? He's been in Paris for a graduate program. He just got back last week. And he immediately sought you out. Alessio stood, pacing the small confines of my living room like a caged predator. Did it not strike you as odd that after months away, he happened to be at the same cafe, at the exact moment you were there? A cold sensation spread through my chest. What are you saying? I'm saying that coincidences make me suspicious. He stopped pacing, fixing me with an intense stare, especially when they involve someone I care about. 2 days after we learn the Donovans are making moves against us. Michael isn't... I trailed off, the absurdity of the accusation warring with the seed of doubt Alessio had planted. Michael had seemed genuinely surprised to see me, hadn't he? But he had asked a lot of questions about my life, my new apartment, whether I was seeing anyone. You don't know that, Alessio said softly, but I intend to find out. No. I stood, facing him directly. You are not investigating my friends. That's exactly why I said we're done, Alessio. This needs to stop. He moved toward me with predatory grace, backing me against the wall without ever touching me. Nothing stops until I know you're safe, he said, his voice low and intense. Nothing. The heat of his body so close to mine sent conflicting signals through my system. Danger and desire, fear and familiarity. This close, I could see the tiny scar at his temple. The result of a childhood accident he'd told me about on one of our rare, quiet evenings together. I could see the flecks of amber in his dark eyes, the slight stubble darkening his jaw. Details that humanized the monster everyone else saw. Why me? I whispered. The question that had haunted me from the beginning finally escaping. Out of everyone you could have chosen. Why me? Something vulnerable flickered across his face. Because you looked at me and saw a man, not a reputation. Because when you smile, it reaches your eyes. Because when I'm with you, the noise in my head quiets. His hand came up to cup my cheek, thumb brushing along my cheekbone. Because from the moment I saw you, I knew you were meant to be mine. The possessive declaration should have repelled me. Instead, It sent a traitorous warmth spiraling through me. 3 months of his attention, his protection, his intensity, had rewired something fundamental in me. "I need to know something," I said, fighting to maintain clarity despite his proximity. "The security, the surveillance. Would it ever stop? If we stayed together, would you ever trust me enough to let me live normally?" He was quiet for a long moment, his eyes never leaving mine. "The world I live in doesn't allow for normal, Eleanor. I can promise to include you in decisions, to explain the reasons behind the security measures. I can promise to try to give you as much freedom as possible without compromising your safety." His thumb traced the curve of my lower lip. "But I will never promise not to protect what's mine. I would burn this city to the ground before I let anyone hurt you." The terrifying part was that I believed him. Alessio Moretti didn't make idle threats or empty promises. "I need time," I said finally, stepping away from his touch. "Space to think, to decide if us, is something I can live with." His jaw tightened, but he nodded once. "How much time?" "I don't know," I admitted. "A few days, maybe a week." He studied me for a long moment. "3 days, he countered, as if negotiating a business deal. "Stay in your apartment where my men can watch the building. Don't contact this Michael or anyone else you're not absolutely certain about." He held up a hand when I started to protest. "Those are my conditions, Eleanor. 3 days of safety in exchange for space." I wanted to refuse, to tell him he had no right to set conditions on my freedom. But the mention of Michael had planted a seed of doubt I couldn't entirely dismiss. What if Alessio was right? What if someone was using my friends to get to me? To get to him? "Fine," I agreed reluctantly. 3 days. No contact with anyone suspicious, but your men stay outside the building, not in the hallway, not watching through windows. A slight smile curved his lips. "You've gotten better at negotiating." "I've had to," I replied, holding his gaze. He inclined his head in acknowledgement. 3 days. I'll have groceries delivered tomorrow. Anything you need." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a sleek black phone. "Take this. It connects directly to me and Marco. Use it if anything feels wrong, anything at all." I hesitated, then took the phone, setting it on the side table. "I won't need it. Humor me." His expression was deadly serious. "Please, that word again, please," so rarely used by a man accustomed to giving orders and having them obeyed without question. He moved toward the door, then paused, turning back to face me. In 3 strides he was before me again, one hand sliding into my hair, tilting my face up to his. 3 days, he murmured, his breath warm against my lips, and then "You're mine again." Before I could respond, his mouth claimed mine in a kiss that was equal parts possession and plea, branding me with the heat of his desire, the intensity of his need. I told myself to resist, to pull away, to maintain the distance I'd been so desperate to create. Instead, my hands clutched at his shoulders, my body arching into his as if it had a will of its own. When he finally broke the kiss, we were both breathing hard. He rested his forehead against mine for a brief moment. "Remember this," he whispered. "Remember how it feels when we're together. Remember that no one else will ever make you feel this way." Then he was gone, the door closing quietly behind him, leaving me alone with swollen lips, shaking hands, and a mind in turmoil. I sank down onto the couch, my fingers unconsciously touching my lips where I could still feel the pressure of his kiss. The phone he'd given me sat on the side table, sleek and black and ominous. 3 days to decide the course of my life. 3 days to determine whether I could accept Alessio's world with all its darkness and danger, or whether I had the strength to walk away from the most intense connection I'd ever experienced. My own phone buzzed again. Another text from Michael. I stared at it, Alessio's suspicions echoing in my mind. Was it really just coincidence that Michael had reappeared in my life now? I set the phone down without reading the message, suddenly unsure of everything and everyone. Outside, the rain continued to fall, mirroring the turmoil inside me. I curled into the corner of the couch, wrapping my arms around myself, feeling the phantom pressure of Alessio's hands, the lingering scent of his cologne, the echo of his words. 3 days to choose between freedom and captivity, though I was no longer certain which was which. Sleep eluded me that night. I tossed and turned, my sheets twisting around my legs like restraints, my mind replaying Alessio's words, his touch, his warnings. By dawn, I'd resigned myself to wakefulness, padding to the kitchen to make strong coffee as pale morning light filtered through the blinds. The apartment felt different somehow, smaller, less secure. I found myself checking the locks twice, peering through the blinds to the street below where a dark sedan sat parked across the way. One of Alessio's men, no doubt, keeping watch as promised. The sight should have angered me, should have reinforced my decision to end things. Instead, I felt a conflicted tangle of emotions. Resentment at the surveillance, yes, but also a treacherous sense of security knowing someone was watching over me. I carried my coffee to the small desk in the corner of my living room, where my half-finished paintings were stacked against the wall. Art had always been my escape, my way of processing emotions too complex for words. I set down my mug and picked up the most recent canvas, a cityscape at dusk, buildings silhouetted against a sky of deep blues and purples, windows glowing like distant stars. I'd started it 2 weeks ago, after a night spent on the balcony of Alessio's penthouse, watching the city lights flicker on as darkness fell. My phone buzzed from the coffee table. My regular phone, not the sleek black one Alessio had left. Another message from Michael, the third since last night. I hesitated, then crossed the room to look at it. Ellie, everything okay? Let me know if we're still on for coffee today. Need to talk about something important. Something important. The words sent an inexplicable chill through me. Alessio's suspicions whispered at the back of my mind, unwelcome but persistent. Was it possible? Could Michael somehow be connected to Alessio's enemies? It seemed absurd. Michael was an artist, passionate about installation art and multimedia experiences, not the type to get involved with organized crime. We'd spent countless hours in studios together, shared cheap wine and cheaper takeout, complained about professors, and critiqued each other's work. He'd never shown any interest in my personal life beyond casual friendship. Until yesterday. Until he'd asked pointed questions about where I was living now, whether I was seeing anyone, how I could suddenly afford tuition without working 2 jobs. I set the phone down without responding, unease coiling in my stomach. Turning back to my painting, I tried to lose myself in the work, but my hands wouldn't cooperate. Every brushstroke felt wrong, every color choice questionable. After an hour of frustration, I set the palette down and walked away. The delivery Alessio promised arrived mid-morning, enough groceries to last a week, not just 3 days. Fresh fruits, vegetables, imported pasta, expensive wine, specialty coffee. The kind of provisions he kept in his own kitchen. Along with the food came a small package wrapped in cream-colored paper. Inside was a leather-bound sketchbook, its pages thick and textured, and a set of charcoal pencils I'd admired in an art supply store window weeks ago, casually mentioned but never purchased. A note accompanied the gift, handwritten in his precise, elegant script. For when the paint doesn't cooperate. How did he know? Had I mentioned my occasional creative blocks? Or was this another example of his uncanny ability to read me, to anticipate my needs before I fully recognized them myself? I ran my fingers over the creamy pages of the sketchbook, torn between gratitude and resentment. Every gift from Alessio came with invisible strings, every gesture of care a subtle reminder of his control. Yet I couldn't deny the thoughtfulness behind this particular offering. Not an expensive trinket to display his wealth, but something personal, something that spoke to who I was, beyond my relationship with him. My phone buzzed again. Michael. Ellie, please respond. It's important we talk today. The urgency in his message sent another ripple of unease through me. I picked up the black phone Alessio had left, weighing it in my hand. One call and Alessio's men would investigate Michael, would determine whether the threat was real or imagined. One call and I would be yielding to Alessio's world once more, accepting his protection and all that came with it. Instead, I set both phones down and reached for the new sketchbook. If I couldn't paint, perhaps I could draw. Perhaps I could find clarity in the smooth glide of charcoal across paper. Hours passed as I lost myself in the rhythm of creation, the apartment growing dim around me as afternoon faded into evening. I'd filled nearly a dozen pages with shadowy cityscapes, abstract patterns, and, most telling, dark eyes that stared out from the paper with an intensity that was unmistakably Alessio's. A sharp knock at my door jolted me from my creative trance. I froze, charcoal suspended above the page. It couldn't be Alessio. He would have called first, would have given me the 3 days he'd promised. One of his men, perhaps, with an update or additional provisions. Another knock, more insistent this time. "Ellie? It's Michael. I know you're in there. Your neighbor said you haven't left all day." My heart stuttered. Michael. Here, at my apartment. How did he even know where I lived? I'd moved since we'd last been in regular contact, and I hadn't mentioned my new address during our brief cafe encounter. "Ellie, please. It's important. I'm worried about you." I rose slowly, setting the sketchbook aside, instinctively wiping my charcoal-stained fingers on a cloth. My gaze darted to the black phone on the coffee table. Should I call Alessio? Was I overreacting? "Eleanor." Michael's voice had dropped, becoming oddly formal. "Open the door. We need to talk about Alessio Moretti." Ice flooded my veins. There it was. Confirmation that this wasn't just a friendly visit, wasn't just about an alumni exhibition. Michael knew about Alessio, knew about us. I moved silently to the door, pressing my eye to the peephole. Michael stood in the hallway, hands in the pockets of his worn leather jacket, his usual disheveled artist appearance unchanged. But something in his posture seemed different, more alert, more purposeful than the laid-back friend I remembered. "I know you're there, Ellie," he called, softer now. "I'm trying to help you. You have no idea what kind of man he is, what he's capable of." But I did know. That was the problem. I knew exactly what Alessio was capable of, both the darkness and the unexpected moments of tenderness. I knew the violence that simmered beneath his controlled exterior, the ruthlessness with which he protected what was his. What I didn't know was who Michael really was, or why he was suddenly so concerned about my relationship. I reached for the black phone with trembling fingers, pressing the only number programmed into it. It connected instantly. "Eleanor." Alessio's voice, alert despite the late hour. "What's wrong?" "Michael's here," I whispered, moving away from the door. "At my apartment. He knows about you. About us." A beat of silence then. "Don't open the door. Marco is 2 minutes away. Stay on the line." Another knock, harder this time. "Eleanor, please. I'm with the FBI. We've been building a case against Moretti for months. You could be in danger." FBI. The claim hit me like a physical blow. I pressed the phone closer to my ear. "Alessio. He says he's FBI. He's lying." Alessio's voice was cold, controlled. "The FBI has no active investigation into my legitimate businesses. This is the Donovans, Eleanor, using your friend to get to you, to get to me." "How can you be sure?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "Because I own half the FBI field office in this city," he replied matter-of-factly. "If there were an investigation, I would know." The casual admission of corruption should have horrified me. Instead, it merely confirmed what I'd already suspected about the extent of Alessio's influence. "Eleanor, listen to me." Michael's voice again, urgent through the door. "Whatever he's told you, it's not the whole truth. He's dangerous. People who cross him disappear." I knew that too. Had seen glimpses of the ruthlessness behind Alessio's carefully maintained facade. Had heard whispered conversations cut short when I entered rooms. Seen the deference tinged with fear in the eyes of those who worked for him. "Marco is pulling up now," Alessio said in my ear. "Stay away from the door, Tesoro." A moment later, I heard heavy footsteps in the hallway, followed by Michael's startled exclamation and the sound of a brief scuffle. Then silence. "It's clear," came Marco's deep voice through the door. "Ms. Sullivan, please open up." I hesitated, then moved to unlock the door, keeping the phone pressed to my ear. "Alessio?" "It's safe," he confirmed. "Let Marco bring you to me." I opened the door to find Marco standing alone in the hallway, his imposing frame blocking my view of whatever had happened to Michael. The bodyguard's expression was impassive, as always, but I noticed a fresh scrape across his knuckles. "Where is he?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Being taken care of," Marco replied, his tone revealing nothing. Mr. Moretti wants you brought to the penthouse immediately. The penthouse. Alessio's fortress in the sky, with its bullet-resistant windows, private elevator, and security system that would put most government buildings to shame. Once there, I would be completely in his world, under his protection, and his control. I need to pack some things, I said, stalling. Marco nodded once. 5 minutes. I returned to the apartment, moving on autopilot as I gathered clothes, toiletries, my sketchbook. The phone was still connected to Alessio's line. "Are you there?" I asked softly. "Always," came his immediate response. "You did the right thing calling me, Eleanor." "What's going to happen to Michael?" A pause. "That depends on what we learn from him." The implication sent a chill through me. "Don't hurt him, Alessio. Please. Whatever he's involved in, he was my friend once. Your safety is my priority," he replied, neatly sidestepping the request. "We'll discuss everything when you arrive." 20 minutes later, I was in the back of Alessio's Mercedes, speeding through the rain-slicked streets toward downtown. Marco drove in silence, his eyes constantly checking mirrors, scanning for threats. I clutched my bag on my lap, the events of the evening playing on repeat in my mind. FBI or Donovan's? Was Michael telling the truth about an investigation, or was he working for Alessio's enemies? And if he was FBI, what did that mean for Alessio? For us? The car pulled into the private underground garage of Alessio's building, stopping near a private elevator that required both a key card and fingerprint recognition. Marco escorted me inside, standing like a statue as we ascended to the penthouse level. The doors opened directly into Alessio's foyer, revealing gleaming marble floors and soft indirect lighting, and there he was, waiting for me, still in his business attire despite the late hour, his expression a careful mask of control with only the tightness around his eyes betraying his concern. "Thank you, Marco," he said, not taking his eyes off me. "Ensure we're not disturbed." The bodyguard nodded and retreated into the elevator, leaving us alone. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then Alessio crossed the space between us in 4 long strides, his hands coming up to frame my face as his eyes searched mine. "Are you hurt?" he asked, thumbs brushing my cheekbones. I shook my head. "No, just confused. Scared." His jaw tightened. "You're safe now." Safe. There was that word again. Safety at the price of freedom, protection that came with golden chains. "What's happening, Alessio?" I asked, stepping back from his touch. "Who is Michael really working for?" He studied me for a long moment, as if deciding how much to tell me. "Come," he said finally, gesturing toward the living room with its wall of windows overlooking the city. "You should sit down." I followed him into the familiar space, noting the glass of whiskey on the side table, the open laptop on the coffee table. He'd been working when I called. Now he guided me to the sofa, sitting close enough that I could feel the heat of him, but not touching. "Michael Andrews is not who you think he is," he began, his voice measured. "He never went to Paris. He's been in federal custody for the past 6 months, cooperating with an investigation into the Donovan family." My breath caught. "He's really FBI?" "No." Alessio's eyes were hard. "He's a confidential informant, a former associate of the Donovans who got caught moving product across state lines. He made a deal to avoid prison." "But why would he come after me? Why claim to be FBI?" Alessio's hand found mine, his fingers warm and steady as they entwined with mine. "Because the Donovans know about you, Tesoro. They know you're my weakness, and they're desperate enough to use anyone and anything to get to me." My weakness. The words echoed in my mind, confirming what I'd feared all along. That my connection to Alessio had made me a target, had put me in danger simply by association. "What will happen to him?" I asked again, unable to keep the tremor from my voice. Alessio's thumb traced circles on the back of my hand, his touch incongruously gentle given the subject matter. "He'll be questioned. Once we confirm his connection to the Donovans, he'll be discouraged from pursuing this particular avenue." "Discouraged," I repeated, the euphemism hanging heavy between us. "I won't lie to you, Eleanor. Not anymore." His dark eyes held mine, unflinching. "There are aspects of my business that aren't beautiful," decisions I make that would disturb you. But everything I do is to protect what's mine. My family, my territory. His hand tightened on mine. You. The raw honesty in his voice stripped away my defenses. This was Alessio without the mask, without the careful control he maintained for the rest of the world. This was the man only I got to see. I was going to leave, I whispered, the admission spilling from me before I could stop it. Before Michael showed up, I'd already decided I couldn't live in your world, couldn't handle the surveillance, the control, the constant fear. Pain flashed across his features, quickly suppressed. And now? I looked down at our joined hands, at how small mine looked enveloped in his. Now I don't know what to think. If Michael was working for your enemies, if they targeted me deliberately. I trailed off, the implications too frightening to voice. Then I was right to have you protected, he finished softly. Right to be cautious about who gets close to you. I couldn't argue with his logic, couldn't deny that his security measures, the very ones I'd been fleeing, might have saved me from a trap. The realization was bitter on my tongue. What happens now? I asked, finally meeting his gaze again. Alessio studied me, his expression softening. Now you stay here, where I can keep you safe, where no one can reach you without going through me first. For how long? As long as necessary. He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. As long as it takes to eliminate the threat. Eliminate. Another euphemism for violence I didn't want to contemplate. And then what? I pressed. Do I go back to my apartment, back to being followed and watched? Back to wondering if every friend, every acquaintance might have ulterior motives for talking to me? A muscle ticked in his jaw. What would you have me do, Eleanor? Pretend there's no danger? Pretend that loving me doesn't come with consequences? Loving me. He'd never used that word before. It hung in the air between us, changing everything and nothing at the same time. I don't know, I admitted, exhaustion suddenly washing over me. I don't know what the answer is. He must have seen the fatigue in my face because his expression softened. It's late. You should rest. We can continue this discussion tomorrow, when you've had time to process everything. Rest. As if sleep were possible with Michael's fate uncertain, with the revelation that Alessio's enemies knew about me, with the word love echoing in my mind. But I nodded anyway, allowing Alessio to lead me to his bedroom with its massive bed and silk sheets that felt like water against the skin. He left me to change into the nightclothes I'd hastily packed, returning moments later in just his trousers, chest bare in the dim light. Stay, I found myself saying as he turned to leave. Please. He hesitated, then nodded, sliding into bed beside me. After a moment's hesitation, I moved into his arms, resting my head against his chest where I could hear the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. His arms came around me, strong and secure, one hand stroking gently through my hair. I will always protect you, he murmured against the top of my head. Even from myself, if necessary. Remember that, Eleanor. I closed my eyes, letting his warmth envelop me, letting the familiar scent of his skin ease my racing thoughts. In that moment, cradled against Alessio Moretti's chest, I felt safer than I had in days, and more trapped than ever before. Morning arrived with golden light filtering through Alessio's floor-to-ceiling windows. For a moment, I lay disoriented, the silk sheets unfamiliar against my skin, before remembering everything, my attempt to end things with Alessio, Michael's appearance at my door, the revelations that followed. I reached across the massive bed to find Alessio's side empty, the sheets cool to the touch. He'd been gone for some time. I sat up slowly, running a hand through my tangled hair, as I took in the familiar surroundings of his bedroom. The sleek minimalist furniture, the abstract painting on the far wall, commissioned from an artist I admired, installed the week after I'd first mentioned liking his work. The doors leading to a walk-in closet where several of my outfits already hung, brought here over the course of our 3-month relationship. Evidence of Alessio's meticulous planning, his silent assumption that I would eventually become a permanent fixture in his life. What had once seemed presumptuous now felt almost prophetic. I slipped from the bed, wrapping myself in the cashmere robe he kept for me before padding barefoot to the adjoining bathroom. The marble was cool beneath my feet as I went through the motions of my morning routine, using the toiletries that had appeared in his bathroom cabinet after our 3rd night together. my preferred brands, my specific products. More evidence of Alessio's attention to detail, his determination to seamlessly incorporate me into his world. Freshly showered, I returned to the bedroom to find clothes laid out on the bed, a soft gray sweater and black jeans I'd left here weeks ago, along with underwear and socks. My own clothing, but selected by Alessio or one of his staff. Another small reminder of his control, his orchestration of even the most mundane aspects of life. Still, I dressed in the provided outfit, needing the comfort of familiar clothes after the upheaval of the past 24 hours. Then I made my way toward the kitchen, following the scent of coffee and the low murmur of voices. I paused in the hallway when I realized Alessio wasn't alone. Marco stood near the kitchen island, his massive frame tense as he spoke in hushed tones. Alessio leaned against the counter, dressed impeccably in a charcoal suit despite the early hour, a cup of espresso cradled in one hand. "Confirm the Donovan connection," Marco was saying. "Phone records show calls to Vincent Donovan's personal line as recently as yesterday morning. And the FBI angle?" Alessio asked, his voice controlled. "A fabrication, as you suspected. Andrews has no connection to any federal agency. He was approached by Vincent's brother 3 weeks ago, offered substantial payment to get close to Ms. Sullivan." My heart clenched at the confirmation of Alessio's suspicions. Michael had lied, had been paid to get close to me, to use our former friendship as a way to infiltrate Alessio's world, to get to me. Where is he now? Alessio's question was deceptively casual, but I recognized the dangerous undercurrent. Marco's response was equally measured. "Secure at the warehouse facility. Awaiting your instructions." Warehouse facility, instructions. More euphemisms for realities I didn't want to contemplate. I must have made some small sound of distress, because both men turned toward me, Alessio's expression immediately softening as he set down his espresso. "Eleanor," he said, moving toward me, "you should still be resting. Is it true?" I asked, ignoring his concern. "About Michael?" Alessio exchanged a glance with Marco, who nodded once and silently exited through a side door, leaving us alone in the kitchen. "Yes," Alessio confirmed, taking my hands in his. "Everything we suspected and more. He was specifically targeted by the Donovans because of your past connection. They've been watching you for weeks, planning the approach. Weeks." The word echoed in my mind. "So when you had me followed, I was protecting you from a very real threat." He squeezed my hands gently, one we now need to address permanently. The implication in his words sent a chill through me. "What are you going to do to him?" Alessio's dark eyes studied me. "What would you have me do, Eleanor? Release him so he can report back to the Donovans? So they can try again, perhaps with someone else from your past?" "You could just warn him off," I suggested, knowing even as I said it how naive it sounded. A small, sad smile curved Alessio's lips. "This isn't a movie, Tesoro. Men like Michael, men who betray their friends for money, don't simply walk away when threatened, and the Donovans won't stop until they've exploited any weakness they can find." "Any weakness," I repeated softly. "Me. You mean me?" He cupped my face in his hands, his touch gentle despite the hardness in his eyes. "You are not a weakness, Eleanor. You are what I fight for, what I would kill for." He paused, his gaze intensifying. "What I would die for." The declaration hung in the air between us, both romantic and terrifying in its implications. This was the reality of loving Alessio Moretti. Passion intertwined with danger, tenderness shadowed by violence. "I can't be responsible for what happens to Michael," I whispered, tears pricking at my eyes. "I can't have that on my conscience." Alessio studied me for a long moment, his thumb brushing away a tear that had escaped down my cheek. "What if there was another way? A solution that neutralizes the threat without the outcome you fear?" Hope flickered within me. "What kind of solution?" "Information is power, Eleanor. The Donovans used your friend to get to you, but we can turn that connection back on them." His voice was calm, reasonable. "Michael knows who contacted him, what they planned, what information they wanted. With the right persuasion, he can become our asset instead of theirs." "You mean torture him until he agrees to spy for you instead?" I translated. pulling away from his touch. Alessio's expression hardened. I mean, offer him a choice between a painful death at the hands of the Donovans when they discover his failure, or a lucrative arrangement with me that keeps him breathing and financially secure. Put that way, it sounded almost merciful, almost. And if he refuses, then I will honor your wish not to have his blood on your hands, Alessio replied carefully. He will be released far from the city with enough resources to disappear. What happens to him after that will be his choice, not mine. It was more than I had expected, this concession. A small victory in a battle I wasn't sure I wanted to fight anymore. Thank you, I said quietly. Alessio inclined his head in acknowledgement, then guided me to one of the high stools at the kitchen island. You should eat something. I had the chef prepare breakfast before he left. Of course he had. Alessio's private chef came each morning to prepare breakfast and lunch, leaving dinner preparations that needed only minimal attention from Alessio himself. Another aspect of his meticulously ordered life. I sat numbly as he placed a plate of fruit, yogurt, and freshly baked pastries before me, along with a steaming cup of coffee made exactly as I preferred it. The domesticity of the moment was surreal given the conversation we'd just had, the decisions being made about Michael's fate while we shared breakfast like any normal couple. What happens now? I asked, picking at a raspberry without appetite. Alessio leaned against the counter across from me, his own coffee in hand. Now we finish what the Donovans started. We send a message that cannot be misinterpreted. His tone was matter-of-fact, as if discussing a business strategy rather than what I suspected was planned violence. What kind of message? His eyes met mine, unflinching. The kind that ensures no one ever thinks to use you against me again. A chill ran through me at his words, at the cold calculation behind them. This was the side of Alessio I'd glimpsed but never fully confronted. The ruthless strategist, the man who had built and maintained his empire through fear, as much as loyalty. Will it ever end? I asked softly. The threats, the enemies, the constant vigilance? Or is this just life with you? Something vulnerable flickered across his features. I won't lie to you, Eleanor. The world I live in doesn't allow for true peace. There will always be threats to address, territories to defend, enemies to neutralize. He set his coffee down and moved around the island to stand beside me, turning my stool to face him. But I can promise you this, every decision I make, every move I orchestrate, is aimed at building a legacy that will eventually allow for a different kind of life, a safer life. Eventually, I repeated, the word hollow with its uncertain timeline. Yes. His hands came to rest on my shoulders, warm and steady. In the meantime, I can offer you protection, resources, a life of comfort and privilege few will ever know. His fingers traced along my jawline. And love, Eleanor. I can offer you that too, though I know it comes tangled with complications you never asked for. Love. There was that word again, spoken plainly now in the morning light. Not a slip in the heat of emotion, but a deliberate declaration. Is that enough? He asked, a rare uncertainty in his voice. Am I enough, despite everything else? The question penetrated the fog of confusion and fear that had surrounded me since receiving Michael's text yesterday. Was Alessio, with all his darkness, all his control, all his danger, enough? Could I accept the protection that felt like a cage, the passion that bordered on possession, the love that demanded complete surrender? Before I could answer, Alessio's phone rang, a specific tone I'd come to recognize as his business line. His expression hardened as he checked the screen. I need to take this, he said, already moving toward his home office. We'll continue our conversation later. I nodded, watching him stride away, back straight, shoulders set, transforming before my eyes from the man who'd just declared his love into the formidable Alessio Moretti that the rest of the world knew and feared. Left alone in the kitchen, I pushed my barely touched breakfast away and moved to the wall of windows overlooking the city. From this height, everything looked small, manageable, distant. Cars moved like toys along the streets, people like ants on the sidewalks, all of them oblivious to the decisions being made in this penthouse, decisions that could alter or end lives. My phone, my regular phone, not Alessio's secure one, chimed from the bedroom where I'd left it in my bag. I retrieved it to find a message from an unknown number. "Eleanor, it's Michael. They're letting me contact you once. Whatever Moretti's told you, he's worse than you know. The FBI really is building a case. Get out while you can. Delete this message." My hands shook as I stared at the screen. Michael had access to a phone? Was this a trick orchestrated by Alessio to test my loyalty? Or was Michael telling the truth after all? I heard Alessio's voice from his office, the tone sharp with authority as he issued instructions to someone on the other end of the line. The familiar sound grounded me, reminded me of who he was, what he was capable of. Marco had confirmed Michael's connection to the Donovans. Phone records had shown calls to Vincent Donovan himself. Those were facts, not Alessio's interpretations or suspicions. And yet, I moved silently to the doorway of Alessio's office, watching as he paced before the windows, phone to his ear. "I want the shipment secured by tonight," he was saying. "Double the usual security. The Donovans will be looking to retaliate after we send our message." My presence must have registered because he turned, his eyes finding mine. Something in my expression must have alerted him because he immediately ended the call. "What's wrong?" he asked, crossing to me in 3 long strides. I held out my phone, showing him Michael's message. His expression darkened as he read it, jaw tightening, eyes narrowing. "Clever," he said finally, voice dangerously soft. "Using your compassion against you. Your tendency to see the best in people, even when they've betrayed you." "Is he wrong?" I asked, needing to hear Alessio's answer. "About the FBI building a case?" Alessio's dark eyes studied me, calculating, assessing. "No," he said finally. "He's not entirely wrong about that." The admission stunned me. I said there was no active investigation into my legitimate businesses," he corrected. That was true. What I didn't mention was the ongoing attempt to build a RICO case against several organizations in the city, including mine. His expression remained unreadable. "It's a cyclical process, Eleanor. Every few years, an ambitious prosecutor or agent tries to make a name for themselves by targeting families like mine. They rarely succeed. Because you own half the FBI field office," I quoted his words from yesterday back to him. A small, cold smile curved his lips. "Among other reasons." I shook my head, trying to process this new information. "So Michael could be working with the FBI?" "No." Alessio's voice was firm. "That part is a lie. His connection to the Donovans is confirmed, indisputable. What he's doing now is trying to drive a wedge between us, to make you doubt me, to get you to leave the safety of my protection." He took my phone from my hand, his movements deliberate, which is exactly what the Donovans want. "I don't know what to believe anymore," I admitted, suddenly exhausted by the layers of deception, the competing narratives, the uncertainty of where truth ended and manipulation began. Alessio's expression softened as he set my phone aside and took both my hands in his. "Believe this," he said quietly. "Everything I've done, the security, the surveillance, even keeping certain truths from you, has been to protect you. Not just your physical safety, but your peace of mind. By lying to me," I challenged, though without much heat. "By shielding you from realities you shouldn't have to face." His thumbs traced circles on my palms. "I wanted to keep the darkness of my world from touching you for as long as possible." The irony of his statement wasn't lost on me. The darkness had already touched me, had seeped into every aspect of my life from the moment I'd accepted that first envelope of cash. Perhaps even before that, from the first time his eyes had met mine across the restaurant. "I need to see him," I said suddenly, the decision crystallizing in my mind. "Michael, I need to look him in the eye when he tells me these things." Alessio's expression hardened. "Absolutely not. I need to know, Alessio. I need to judge for myself. It's too dangerous." "Not if you're there," I interrupted. "Not if Marco's there. Not in your warehouse facility with your men everywhere." I squeezed his hands. "Please. I need this." He studied me for a long moment, his dark eyes unreadable. "You don't trust my word," he said finally, a statement rather than a question. "I trust that you believe what you're telling me," I replied carefully. "But I also know you would lie to protect me." that you might withhold information you think would upset me. A muscle ticked in his jaw, but he didn't deny it. And if I arrange this meeting, if you hear whatever story he's concocted, then I'll make my decision, I said simply. About Michael, about the FBI, about us. I met his gaze steadily. You said last night that you would protect me even from yourself if necessary. Prove it, Alessio. Give me the truth, all of it, and let me decide what I can live with. Something like respect flickered in his eyes, followed by resignation. Very well, he said finally. I'll arrange it for this afternoon. But you will follow my instructions exactly. No deviations, no impulsive decisions. My men will be present at all times. Agreed, I said, relief flooding through me at this small victory. Alessio's hand came up to cup my cheek, his touch gentle despite the intensity in his eyes. You should know, Tesoro, that regardless of what you hear today, regardless of what decision you make about us, you will remain under my protection. That is non-negotiable. The declaration should have felt like a threat. Instead, it washed over me with the certainty of a vow, a promise more binding than any wedding oath. Whether I chose to stay with Alessio or walk away, I would never truly be free of his presence in my life, his watchful eye, his protective shadow. The realization should have terrified me. Perhaps it did, on some level. But mixed with the fear was something else. A sense of security I'd never known before. A certainty that no matter what happened, I would never face the world's dangers alone again. I understand, I said quietly. He nodded once, then leaned forward to press his lips to my forehead, the gesture tender, despite the tension thrumming through him. Get ready, he said, stepping back. We leave in an hour. As he turned back to his desk, already reaching for his phone to make the necessary arrangements, I found myself studying his profile. The strong line of his jaw, the perfect posture, the air of absolute authority that surrounded him like an aura. This was Alessio Moretti in his element, orchestrating events, controlling outcomes, bending the world to his will, and I was caught in his orbit, both resisting and surrendering to his gravitational pull, trapped between the desire to flee and the increasing certainty that there was nowhere in the world I could go where I would feel as safe, as alive, as I did at his side. For better or worse, Alessio had become my North Star, my frame of reference, my definition of both danger and security. Whatever I learned today from Michael, whatever decision I made about our future, that fundamental truth would remain unchanged. I turned away from the sight of him at his desk, moving back toward the bedroom to prepare for whatever revelations the afternoon might bring. Each step felt weighted with significance, as if I were walking not just through Alessio's penthouse, but toward a new understanding of who I was and what I could accept in the name of love. Because that's what it was, I realized with startling clarity. Love, complicated, dangerous, possessive, but love nonetheless. The question wasn't whether Alessio loved me, or even whether I loved him. The question was whether love alone was enough to justify the life that came with it. By afternoon, I would have my answer. The warehouse district loomed gray and industrial against the afternoon sky, a maze of concrete structures and chain-link fences far from the gleaming downtown towers where Alessio typically conducted business. Marco drove in silence, navigating the unmarked roads with practiced ease while Alessio sat beside me in the back of the Mercedes, his hand covering mine in a gesture both possessive and reassuring. I hadn't spoken much during the drive, my mind racing with questions, with doubts, with the weight of the decision that lay before me. Alessio had respected my silence, offering neither platitudes nor pressures, simply the steady presence of his hand on mine. The car finally slowed before what appeared to be an abandoned loading facility, its windows blacked out, its exterior deliberately nondescript. Two men in dark suits appeared from nowhere as Marco pulled to a stop, moving into position as Alessio's door was opened. "Stay close to me," Alessio murmured as he helped me from the car, his hand immediately finding the small of my back. "Remember what we discussed?" I nodded, recalling his precise instructions. Stay within arm's reach at all times. Speak only to Michael. Ask whatever questions I needed answered, but reveal nothing of my own thoughts or feelings. Simple rules designed to protect me while allowing the confrontation I'd requested. We entered the building through a heavy metal door, passing through a security checkpoint where 2 more of Alessio's men stood guard. The interior was surprisingly modern compared to the decaying exterior. Polished concrete floors, bright LED lighting, a series of offices with glass walls that had been deliberately frosted to obscure their contents. Alessio guided me through a maze of corridors, until we reached a room at the far end of the building. Another of his men stood outside, nodding respectfully as we approached. "Is he ready?" Alessio asked, his voice betraying none of the tension I could feel in his body. "Yes, sir, as you instructed." Alessio turned to me, his dark eyes searching mine. "Last chance to change your mind, Eleanor. You don't need to do this." "I do," I replied softly. "I need to know the truth." Something like resignation flickered across his features before his expression smoothed into the impassive mask he presented to the world. He nodded to the guard, who unlocked the door and stepped aside. The room beyond was simple: a table, 2 chairs on one side, one on the other. And there, seated alone, was Michael. He looked haggard, a day's growth of beard darkening his jaw, dark circles shadowing his eyes. But he was unharmed, at least as far as I could tell, wearing the same clothes he'd had on yesterday when he'd appeared at my door. His eyes widened when he saw me, relief washing over his features. "Ellie," he breathed. "Thank God. Are you okay?" I felt Alessio stiffen beside me at the familiar address, at the genuine concern in Michael's voice. But he remained silent, allowing me to take the lead as promised. "I'm fine," I said, moving to sit in one of the chairs across from Michael. Alessio followed, taking the seat beside me, his posture deceptively relaxed, though I could sense the coiled tension beneath his calm exterior. "Has he hurt you?" Michael asked, eyes darting nervously to Alessio before returning to me. "Threatened you?" "No," I answered truthfully. "But I need to know who you're really working for, Michael. The truth." He leaned forward, hands flat on the table between us. "I told you yesterday. I'm with the FBI. We've been building a case against Moretti and his organization for months. Witness testimony, financial records, surveillance." His eyes flicked to Alessio again. "We know what he is, Ellie. What he does." "And what exactly is that?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "He's not just some businessman with shady connections," Michael said, leaning closer. "He orders hits on rivals, traffics weapons through the port, has half the city officials in his pocket. People who cross him disappear." His voice dropped. "Ask him about Joseph Caldwell, or Diana Russo. Ask him what happened to them when they refused to cooperate." I felt rather than saw Alessio's minute reaction to the names. A barely perceptible tension in his shoulders, a slight narrowing of his eyes. "If you're with the FBI," I said carefully, "why did phone records show calls between you and Vincent Donovan?" Michael's expression faltered momentarily before he recovered. "Part of my cover. I've been working both sides, feeding the Donovans false information while gathering evidence for the Bureau." He leaned forward again, voice urgent. "They're going to move on him soon, Ellie. Major RICO indictments. Anyone associated with him will be implicated. You need to get clear before that happens." I glanced at Alessio, who remained perfectly still, his expression giving nothing away. He'd promised to let me handle this, to allow me to reach my own conclusions. "Why did you really come back from Paris?" I asked, returning my attention to Michael. "And why approach me specifically?" A flicker of something, hesitation, calculation, passed behind his eyes. The investigation reached a critical point. They needed someone who could get close to Moretti's inner circle, someone he wouldn't immediately suspect. His gaze intensified. "When they discovered your connection to him, I volunteered. I couldn't let you stay in danger, Ellie. Not when I could help get you out. It was a good story, delivered with convincing sincerity. If I hadn't seen the evidence Alessio had presented, if I hadn't experienced the methodical way he verified information, I might have believed it." "You never went to Paris, did you?" I asked quietly. Michael blinked, momentarily thrown by the direct question. "What?" "Paris," I repeated. "The graduate program you claim to attend. It doesn't exist, does it? At least not with you as a student." His expression hardened slightly. This isn't about me, Ellie. It's about him. He jerked his head toward Alessio. About getting you away from his influence before you're in too deep. I think I'm already in too deep, I said, surprising myself with the calm acceptance in my voice. I think I have been since the beginning. Michael's eyes widened. He's gotten to you, he whispered. Stockholm Syndrome. It happens with victims of controlling relationships. You start to identify with enough. Alessio's voice cut through the room like a blade. Quiet but commanding. You've had your say. You've told your story. Now it's time for the truth. He reached into his jacket and withdrew a small recording device, placing it on the table between us. With a click, a conversation filled the room. Michael's voice, followed by another man's, their exchange clearly captured despite the background noise of what sounded like a busy restaurant. She's definitely the weak point, Michael was saying. 3 months in and she's already chafing at the security. One push and she'll break things off. And Moretti? The other voice asked. You know his reputation with women. He won't let her go easily. When she tries to leave, he'll be distracted, vulnerable. That's your window. You're sure you can get close enough to her? Michael's laugh was cold, calculated. Nothing like the warm sound I remembered from our art school days. Trust me. One mention of the old times, a little concern about her new lifestyle, and she'll be spilling everything. She always was an open book. Alessio clicked off the recording, the silence that followed heavy with implication. I stared at Michael, searching his face for any trace of the friend I thought I'd known, finding instead a stranger whose features twisted with frustration at being exposed. That's doctored, he spat. Edited. A trick. No, I said softly, the truth settling in my chest with surprising clarity. It's not. Ellie, you can't believe him over me, Michael pleaded, desperation entering his voice. We've known each other for years. He's manipulating you, can't you see that? I studied him across the table, this man who had once critiqued my artwork with honest enthusiasm, who had shared late-night conversations about dreams and fears, who had now revealed himself to be a stranger wearing a familiar face. When did they approach you? I asked, curious despite the pain of betrayal. Michael's jaw tightened, his eyes darting between Alessio and me before his shoulders slumped slightly. 6 months ago, he admitted finally. I owed money. A lot of money. Gambling debts. They offered to clear it in exchange for information about Moretti's operation. And when that expanded to using me, a flicker of genuine regret crossed his features. That wasn't the original plan, but when they found out about our connection, he trailed off. I'm sorry, Ellie. I didn't have a choice. There's always a choice, Alessio said, his voice deceptively mild, though I could sense the fury beneath. You chose the Donovans. You chose to betray a friend. You chose to place her in danger. As opposed to what she's in with you? Michael shot back, a hint of defiance returning. At least with us, she had a chance to walk away eventually. With you, it's a life sentence. I felt Alessio tense beside me, saw his hand curl into a fist on his thigh beneath the table. But when he spoke, his voice remained controlled. Eleanor makes her own choices. Unlike the Donovans, I respect her agency in that regard. Michael's bitter laugh held no humor. Right, that's why you have her followed, why you've isolated her from friends and family, why you're holding her hostage in your world. The accusation struck closer to home than I wanted to admit, echoing doubts I'd harbored myself. But hearing them from Michael's lips, Michael, who had conspired to use me as a pawn, stripped them of their power. I've heard enough, I said, rising from my chair. I turned to Alessio, finding his dark eyes already on mine, watchful, waiting. I'd like to leave now. He nodded once, standing in a fluid motion. His hand found the small of my back, steadying and protective as we moved toward the door. Ellie, wait, Michael called desperately. Whatever he's promised you, whatever protection he's offered, it won't last. The Donovans won't stop. And when they come after him, you'll be caught in the crossfire. I paused at the door, turning back to face the man I'd once called friend. What will happen to him? I asked Alessio softly. His expression remained impassive. As we discussed, he'll be given resources to disappear. What he does with that opportunity is his choice. Relief mingled with something like gratitude as I nodded. acknowledging Alessio's adherence to our agreement, despite what we'd learned. "Goodbye, Michael," I said, meeting his desperate gaze one last time. "I hope you use your second chance wisely." We left him there, surrounded by the consequences of his choices, his betrayal, his miscalculation. In the corridor outside, Alessio drew me against him, his arms encircling me in a protective embrace, as I finally allowed the emotions of the confrontation to wash over me. "You knew," I murmured against his chest. "You knew what he would say, what excuses he would make." "I know how men like him think," Alessio replied, his voice rumbling beneath my ear. "How they operate, how they justify their actions." His hand stroked gently along my spine. "Are you all right?" I pulled back slightly to look up at him. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "I just found out someone I trusted for years was willing to use me as a pawn in a power struggle between criminal organizations. That's going to take some processing." A shadow of guilt crossed his features. "A struggle you're only involved in because of me," he said quietly. "Because I brought you into my world." "No," I corrected, surprising myself with the conviction in my voice. "Because I chose to enter it, because I called that number, because I accepted what you offered, knowing, or at least suspecting, what it might mean." His eyes searched mine, looking for doubt, for hesitation. "And now? Knowing everything you know, seeing the reality of the dangers, the enemies, the complications that come with being mine, what do you choose now, Eleanor?" It was the question that had haunted me since I'd texted those 2 words. "We're done." What felt like a lifetime ago. The question I'd been avoiding even as events had pulled me deeper into Alessio's world, his protection, his possession. "I choose," I began, then paused, gathering my thoughts, my courage. "I choose to stay, not because I'm trapped, not because I have no other options, but because despite everything, the control, the danger, the darkness, there's something between us worth fighting for." Relief washed over his features, softening the hard lines of his face. "You understand what that means?" he asked, his hands coming up to frame my face. "The life we'll have together won't be normal. There will always be threats, always be precautions." "I know," I said simply. "But there will also be this." I placed my hand over his heart, feeling its strong, steady beat beneath my palm. The man beneath the reputation, the tenderness behind the control, the love behind the possession. His eyes darkened at my words. "Love," he repeated, testing the word as if it were unfamiliar on his tongue. "Yes, that's what this is, isn't it? This need to protect you, to keep you safe, to burn the world if necessary to ensure no harm comes to you." His thumb traced the curve of my lower lip. "I've never said those words to anyone before." "You don't have to say them now," I assured him. "I can feel them in everything you do." But Alessio Moretti had never been a man to leave important matters unspoken. His gaze intensified as he leaned closer. "I love you, Eleanor Sullivan. With everything I am, everything I have, everything I will ever be." The declaration washed over me like a wave, powerful and overwhelming in its simplicity, its finality. This wasn't just a confession of feeling, but a vow as binding and irrevocable as any ever spoken. "I love you too," I whispered, the truth of it resonating through me with crystalline clarity, with open eyes, knowing exactly who you are, what you do, what loving you means. His kiss was gentle despite the intensity in his eyes, a tender claiming that held none of the desperation of our last embrace. This was certainty, not fear, commitment, not possession. When we parted, he rested his forehead against mine. "There are things we need to discuss," he said quietly. "Changes I'm willing to make, compromises we can reach about your freedom, your independence." Hope flickered within me at his words. "What kind of changes?" "No more surveillance without your knowledge," he began. "Full transparency about security measures. You'll have direct access to the head of my security team, the ability to question or object to any arrangement that makes you uncomfortable." His eyes held mine. "I can't promise no protection, Eleanor, but I can promise partnership in how that protection is implemented." It wasn't perfect freedom, It wasn't a normal life, but it was a concession I hadn't expected. A willingness to adapt that spoke volumes about his respect for my autonomy, my concerns. "I can work with that," I said, offering a small smile. "There's more," he continued, expression serious. "The Donovans need to be dealt with permanently, not just because of their attempt to use you, but because as long as they exist, they'll continue to be a threat." He paused, gauging my reaction. "That means decisive action." Action you may not want to know the details of. I considered his words, the implication behind them. This was the reality of Alessio's world. Enemies eliminated, threats neutralized, power maintained through means I would probably find disturbing if examined too closely. "Will it end the danger? Truly end it?" I asked. "Nothing ends all danger," he answered honestly, "but it will eliminate the most immediate threat. Send a message that will discourage others for some time." I nodded slowly. "Then do what you need to do, but you're right. I don't want the details." He studied me for a long moment, as if memorizing my features, my expression. "And after," he said finally, "perhaps we could take some time away. There's a property I own on the Mediterranean, private, secure, a place to adjust to our new understanding. A honeymoon without the wedding," I suggested, attempting lightness despite the weight of our conversation. Something sparked in his eyes. "For now," he agreed, a hint of a smile curving his lips. "Though I have every intention of making you mine in every way possible, Eleanor. In time." The possessiveness in his tone should have alarmed me. Instead, it sent warmth spiraling through me, a sense of belonging I'd never experienced before meeting him. "In time," I echoed, making no promises but closing no doors. He nodded once. Decision made. "Then let's go home. There are arrangements to be made, plans to set in motion." His hand found mine, fingers intertwining with natural ease. A future to secure. As we walked back through the maze of corridors, Alessio's presence solid and certain beside me, I reflected on the journey that had brought us to this point. From that first meeting at Bellini's to this moment of clarity in an anonymous warehouse, from uncertainty to commitment, from fear to acceptance. I had texted Alessio Moretti, "We're done," believing I could walk away from the intensity, the danger, the possession his love represented. He had replied, "You don't decide that," certain of his claim on me, on us, on our future together. In the end, we had both been wrong. The decision was neither his alone nor mine, but something we would forge together, a partnership balanced on the knife edge between his need to control and my need for freedom, between his dangerous world and my longing for normalcy, between his possessive love and my stubborn independence. It wouldn't be easy. It wouldn't be perfect. But as we stepped out into the fading afternoon light, Alessio's arm protective around my waist, his men forming a perimeter of security around us, I knew with absolute certainty that it would be real. Complicated, dangerous, intense, but real. And for now, for us, that was enough. 3 days ago, I had tried to end something I didn't fully understand. Today, I was choosing to begin something with open eyes, clear mind, and a heart that recognized its home in the most unexpected of places, beside a man the world feared, but whom I had come to love. As Alessio helped me into the waiting car, his touch gentle despite the power in his hands, I caught a glimpse of his expression. Possessive. Yes, but also tender, reverent, as if he couldn't quite believe I had chosen him, chosen this life, chosen us. "You're sure?" he asked quietly as the car pulled away. One last chance to change my mind. I reached for his hand, linking my fingers with his in answer. "I'm sure." His smile, rare, genuine, transforming his features from dangerous to devastatingly handsome, was confirmation that whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever compromises would be required, whatever darkness we might face, we would face it together. Not captor and captive, not predator and prey, but partners in a love that defied conventional boundaries, traditional definitions, normal expectations. A love as dangerous and beautiful as the man beside me. A love I had finally, fully, chosen to embrace.